We've been covering the Pittsburgh Steelers draft moves and top 30 visits, and we'll get to some of that. But we want to talk about what have the Steelers done and what do the Steelers need to do to continue developing Kenny Pickett to put him in the best situation for his second year in the NFL. We'll talk about that here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, joined today by Ray Fittipaldo, our Steelers beat writer. We'll also be talking Pirates with Jason Mackey. It's going to be a fun-packed show right here for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Again, we're joined today by Ray Fittipaldo, our Steelers beat writer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. You can get all our Post-Gazette content at post-gazette.com. You can also check out all of our video and audio content on your favorite podcasting app or right here on YouTube. Like this video if you see it on YouTube. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to catch all of your daily content from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But the North Shore Drive podcast, we are Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We're wrapping up the week this week. Ray, we'll get into some of the top 30 visits that you've been keeping track of and doing a diligent job of doing that. But I want to talk to you from the angle of we can't lose sight of the Steelers got their quarterback last year. The guy that they see as their future franchise quarterback in Kenny Pickett. And he's been working out during the offseason. We've seen that. And we've talked about some of the guys that they're bringing in. But how much do you think that this upcoming draft is about building around Kenny Pickett? We've seen him add offensive linemen to the interior in free agency. There's talk about offensive tackle. There's talk about some receivers, but how much of making of it reinforcing Kenny Pickett is the focus right now versus just bettering the overall roster, including the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a priority for them, Chris, but I think based on what they did not do in free agency, I think they're going to take a receiver in this draft. I just don't know if it's going to come super early. Like, I'm thinking pick 80, pick 120, maybe pick 49. They might address it if there's a receiver there that they really love. Just the way I look at it, this is a team that's built around its defense.
Yes.
This is an offense that is they're trying to build a strong running game with a rookie quarterback or a second-year quarterback, and they want to give him weapons, but I think the focus is going to be on the running game, and you already have Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, and Pat Freiermuth. I think you could pick up a number 3, number 4 receiver, say in the 3rd round or in the 4th round, and get that guy going, and maybe by the middle of his rookie season, he could be a contributor for you. But any talk of Jordan Addison like at 17 or 32, I can't buy into that, right? I
feel you. I agree with you. They're not doing that.
Yeah. So I think the sweet spot for me is probably 3rd round or 4th round, but because they have that extra 2nd round pick, I think it could come at 49 too. But again, it's going to have to be a really, really good player in that spot.
No, see, I agree with you as far as how the Steelers are going to handle it. This is absolutely going to be part of their plan. Like, something crazy would have to happen otherwise. But do you think it's the right move? Like, just as a person who analyzes the Steelers, should they be adding to the weapon tank for Kenny Pickett or focusing more on him with this draft?
I think eventually you're probably going to have to find a replacement for Deontay Johnson, but that's 2 years down the road, right? I mean,
right.
George Pickens, 3 years left on that rookie contract. Pat Freiermuth has 2 years left. They could use the tag on any of those guys. So, yes, I do think they have to think about that eventually. And I think the nice thing is when Kenny Pickett is in year 3 or year 4, you might be ready to actually build your offense around him rather than a running game, right? So, I think that's something to keep an eye on. But, again, like this year, I have no issue with them. They draft an offensive tackle at 17, and they don't take a receiver until the 4th round. I think they have certain priorities in this draft. I think receiver is one of them. I just don't think it's a top priority right now.
Yeah, I feel you on that. And to me, I don't think that's a bad approach right now. The Steelers, when they've been able to win the last 2 years, they've won 18 games in 2 seasons, nine wins a season. In each of those games, they've done A, kept the team to 20 points or less, along with B, winning or tying the turnover battle. They've won with defense and with controlling the ball. And that's not saying that you shouldn't invest into Kenny Pickett, but I think it's also an acknowledgement you're not going to probably get the best version of Kenny Pickett next year. You're not adding to a 32-year-old Ben Roethlisberger who's in his prime like the Steelers were doing in the 2010s when they kept trying to draft more wide receivers. Just get all the weapons. I don't think that there's time to do that for Kenny Pickett. And Mike Tom even talked about as much with the owners' meetings. We've seen kind of talk about the emphasis of building the run game, building the defense. I just think that that's the way, and it doesn't mean that they don't care about building around Kenny Pickett or giving him more opportunities to succeed. It just means he's got to fit into the puzzle that they've kind of built together right now. And quarterback production isn't the biggest thing that's going to win games for this roster the way it's made.
Yeah, Chris, think back to November. When Chase Claypool was still on this roster, one of the reasons they felt comfortable dealing him was they did like the depth at receiver that they had, but also it simplified things for Kenny Pickett. He didn't have to worry about feeding Chase Claypool anymore when that was maybe a little bit of an issue. And he could just take care of George Pickens, and he could take care of Deontay Johnson and Pat Freiermuth. So, if you think about it, let's say a hypothetical. Let's say, Jordan Addison is there at 32. Like, realistically, how many targets could you get for Jordan Addison?
I agree.
During his rookie season, right? I mean, you're talking about, the equivalent of a number 4 receiver. So, I just don't get, what the value would be for them there. Yeah, I would be all on board with a very good receiver early in the 2024 draft. I just don't see it right now.
And one thing we've seen year after year, almost every year, there's a bunch of talented receivers that come through. It's not like like this year, there is an exceptional tight end class, an exceptional cornerback class. Those don't always happen. Receiver, there's in a lot of draft classes, you can look and say like, man, there's about 10 receivers that if I add to my roster, I'm confident they're going to at least contribute in their 4 years of their rookie deal, and then maybe become a veteran that we sign for the long term. But the Steelers have shown that that's what they were doing for the longest time with their receivers. So I'm right with you. I wanted to explore this with you because I think that there's been we've done the hyper focusing on what the Steelers need to do to improve their roster, but I think it's important not to lose sight of what Kenny Pickett is. And I honestly think the biggest thing that can happen for Kenny Pickett is the development of Kenny Pickett, which we talked about on Wednesday with Brian Batko about the hiring of Glenn Thomas, another pair of offensive eyes. How much can the Steelers do to continue developing him, and how much sharper can he get there? I think that's the primary concern, and that's something we won't see until the Steelers take the field next year, because even in training camp, it's just training camp. Until we see him play in regular season football, we won't know how that is played out.
Yeah, a lot of his story has yet to be told, Chris, and I think his development this year, I think you're going to see him take a big step, but again, the time for him to be like a franchise quarterback, carry the offense, I don't think that's going to happen in 2023.
I hear you on that. I want to talk to you more about some of these top 30 visits that have come through that you wrote about for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We'll do that in just a minute here on the North Shore Drive podcast, so don't go anywhere. But first, I want to talk to you guys about the great app called Game Time. What is Game Time? GameTime.co is your opportunity to get tickets for your favorite events without having to stress out about it. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. Killer deals on last-minute ticket options with the best price guarantee that this company offers. You can stop stressing over tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you're about to have. If you download the Game Time app, it allows you to book tickets up to the last minute if you didn't plan far out in advance, or just your schedule opened up like mine often does. And I'm like, man, how can I get to that game, or how can I get to that event? I want to be in there. Here's where Game Time comes in for you. You can get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and much, much more. The Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code PITT, P-I-T-T, for $20 off your first purchase. Or go to their website, gametime.co. That's GAMETIME.co. Terms apply. Create an account and redeem code PITT, PITT, all capital letters, all one word, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast, Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo talking Steelers here. We will get to Jason Mackey about the Pirates and their 4-2 start after sweeping the Red Sox and how they look heading into their home opener that comes this Friday, and the blackout that's been requested. All of that will be talked about on the show. But want to talk more about the draft visits the Steelers have been pulling in. Ray, a big name came through in Christian Gonzalez, the Oregon cornerback, who some people have slated as the top corner in this draft class. That was a big woe to me, because a lot of the guys that the Steelers have brought in, the Emmanuel Forbeses, the Julius Brents, the Deontay Banks, and those are just cornerback names, but even guys like Keanu Benton, DeJuan Jones, Osiris Torrance, all those guys are projected to go like late first, early second, mid second, even late second. Christian Gonzalez is one of those dudes that's way up there. We haven't seen them call too many of those guys in for top 30 visits. Is there a sense that maybe they'll trade up for him?
I don't know if there's a sense for that. It could be. I mean, there's two things. It could be that, right? Or it could be they're doing their due diligence, and maybe there's a chance that he falls to 17. So, I think with Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan going to the pro days, for the SEC schools and the Big Ten schools, the schools that are, in the general area of the Steelers, they don't venture to the West Coast very often. You'll see position coaches go out there, scouts go out there, but you don't see Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan go to schools like USC or Oregon. So right. I think this is their way. Okay, we are interested in Christian Gonzalez. We're going to bring you in. We're going to put you on the whiteboard. We're going to do all that stuff we would normally do with you, maybe on campus, but we're just going to bring you in to our facility. Now, Chris, I haven't seen him in a mock draft below 15. I've seen him in the top 10 much more so than I've seen him between, say, 11 and 15 or 16. So the likelihood of him being there, I don't think it's very good. Possibility for a trade up? Yeah. I mean, Omar Khan said everything is on the table. So I think you have to leave that door open. But I'm with you. My brow was raised a little bit when I heard he was coming in today. And it just shows you 6 cornerbacks have come in. 6 offensive linemen have come in. There's no guesswork. They are going to take an offensive lineman early in the top 2 rounds, 3 rounds, and they're going to do the same with cornerback. Those 2 positions will be addressed, and they will be addressed early.
I agree with you there, and you got to explore your options there. And I think it's really cool how you brought up, this is just, there could be their due diligence of just getting to know this guy. That's what they do with Minka Fitzpatrick. That's how they operate. Mike Tomlin. One of the reasons I think Mike Tomlin is so beloved across the NFL is that he has done more than the groundwork, not just with players, but with coaches, to make sure that he establishes relationships with guys and he values those relationships. And Christian Gonzalez, even if he never comes to the Steelers, look at Patrick Peterson. He came to the Steelers. He's like, I've always loved Mike Tomlin. And Patrick Peterson, how many times, Ray, have you sat here at this time of the year, or when free agency was about to open and Steelers fans were tweeting at you, Ray, are they going to sign or are they going to trade for Patrick Peterson? And now, yes, he's at the tail end of his career, but he has a relationship with Mike Tomlin. He likes Mike Tomlin, and he's excited to play for the organization. That stuff has value. So I'm with you on Christian Gonzalez. They are heavily invested into cornerback as a position, so why not take a look at one of the top guys out there? Other guys that they had visit, though, Keon White of Georgia Tech, a defensive lineman, Steve Avila, the guard, interior offensive lineman for TCU, and cornerback Darius Rush, another one of those corners we talked about, who's projected to go a bit later. Like I'd say that there's that first tier where you have Gonzalez, Witherspoon, Porter. If you want to throw Deontay Banks in there, fine. Then there's that second tier with like Julius Brents, Emmanuel Forbes, those guys. Personally, I put Darius Rush on like a third tier after those guys, though, I was just talking about there. And that's fine. He can go in the 3rd or 4th round. But I think that he'd be a heck of an addition here, especially if they're doubling up at cornerback. I think that if he's the lone cornerback pick, I think there's going to be some legitimate disappointment about adding to that cornerback room.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they doubled down on corners either, Chris. But, Rush is 6'2". I think he's up like in the 190s, low 200s. So I think if they took a second corner, I would think it would be like a slot guy, a guy who was 5'10", 5'11", who can maybe, fill that slot role where Arthur Mollett is slotted in right now. But we all know he's kind of like a run-stopping nickel. He's not really a guy who they want in there in passing situations. So everyone they've brought in here to this point has been a bigger corner, an outside corner. I guess Brent's, he's 6 foot. I guess there's a chance they could view him differently. But, I think we've talked about this before. This is not a draft with a ton of slot corners or highly graded slot corners. There are a lot of big, tall, athletic outside corners, but those slot corners, which the Steelers need, they're not prevalent in this draft. You're going to have to go find one, I think maybe third, fourth in the later rounds.
I do wonder if a slot corner is because if getting an outside and an inside corner, Emmanuel Forbes, he's a guy that can play outside, but he's so light. He's what came into the combine at 166, and yes, he's 6'1", but he's a guy I'd be interested to see. Could he slide in and play slot? Travius Hodges Tomlinson, we know the Steelers love their bloodlines. He's a guy. He's smaller. He could play the slot there, and he would be another guy there, and that would be interesting. But Darius Rush, an interesting piece there as far as playing outside. If the Steelers were to double up at cornerback, I think it's the most likely position they do double up at, whereas, offensive tackle, if they get to, I feel like, they're forcing out Chukwuma Okorafor on top of Dan Moore, and I'm not so sure they have that in the cards unless they just, a guy falls and they're like, we can't pass that guy up. He's just the guy that's valued too well there. But, I look at this and I think, man, the corners that they keep bringing in, and again, we look at the corners they brought in, Brent, Banks, Forbes, Gonzalez, Rush, Tyreek Stevenson. A lot of these guys are slated to go there, and a lot of those guys are outside corners. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what they settle on as a future pick for the team.
Yeah, one more name as a slot corner you did not mention, Clark Phillips from Utah. But like Tomlinson, he's 5'8". His comp, or 5'9", he might be 5'9", but Clark Phillips's comp is Mike Hilton. So again, but they haven't brought any of those guys in. They didn't bring in Tomlinson. They didn't bring in Clark Phillips. Now they got about 12 more. So we'll see what happens over the next week or so. They usually cut off these visits, the week before the draft. So we'll see if they bring any slot corners in. But to this point, it's been all big, tall, physical outside corners that they've, been scouting both on the road and here at the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex.
Absolutely. There's a lot still to happen there. We'll be keeping you up to date with things here. Ray, thank you so much for your time and all the hard work that you do to keep up with the Pittsburgh Steelers and all their moves. We'll keep talking Steelers when we come back next week, but next it's time for the Buccos. Jason Mackey has been hard at work. He covered their 2 first road trips there. Now they're back in Pittsburgh. They're set for a home opener that's set to be packed at PNC Park. All the excitement behind that. We're going to get to all of that and what to expect and what has happened with the Pirates' hot start with Jason Mackey in a minute. Don't go anywhere. The North Shore Drive podcast from Pittsburgh Post-Gazette will be right back. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, and we have now switched. We've got Jason Mackey on, our esteemed Pirates beat writer here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Jason is back from Bradenton. He's back from Boston. He's back from everywhere. He's been all over, and now he's back in Pittsburgh for the home opener. I'll get questions to you, Jason, on the home opener first, but what's it been like covering this Pirates team that's got this hot start right now, 4-2, coming off a sweep of the Boston Red Sox?
A lot of fun, man. A lot of fun. I'm smiling. It's a good team to be around. It really is. There's a good vibe. It's been that way since spring training. And obviously they didn't play. I don't want to say they played poorly in Cincinnati. They just didn't do some things. And then they go to Boston, completely different outcome. The process of what went into it. But it's just a really fun team, Chris. It really is. And I've been saying this to people, like, I think the Pirates can take steps forward this year. I do think they're going to take steps forward this year. And I think the way they do it, they're going to be interesting. You saw it. Like, you can't help but enjoy watching O'Neal Cruz. The catch that G1 Bay made in Boston. I mean, my goodness. Brian Reynolds, the zone he was in, what Andrew McCutchen has done for this team, some of the veterans that are coming in and contributing and doing good things. Like, this is just, it's such a fun group to be around.
Absolutely. And it seems like it's fun right now. Brian Reynolds hitting 417, McCutchen with an on-base percentage of 522, looking really, really solid right now. But I got to talk to you about the new guy, Mitch Keller, throwing heat. I got to say, I was watching that game. I had just finished like a podcast episode, and then I turn on that game, and then I see the ball that they said was a home run, and then it wasn't. And I went like, well, I'm just cursing them. But then it wasn't a home run. It was a foul ball, and then Mitch Keller delivers a heck of a strikeout. I'm like, okay, Mitch Keller, I see you out there. How have you seen his start with the Pirates this year?
Wow, Mitch has grown up a lot, man. He really has. And my first road trip on the beat was when Mitch made his MLB debut. I've seen every one of his starts, and
wow,
like, this kid was in the dumps in 2021, and now we're talking about a dude with 6 pitches who used them all effectively against the Red Sox. I picked up a Boston Globe this morning, and I was reading a quote. It was the end quote. I forget who said it, but basically, like, this guy made us look stupid with 6 pitches, all of them good, dominated us. Like, that's who Mitch Keller has become, man. 3 different kinds of fastballs, not only a 4-seamer, which was getting hit hard, not only a sinker, but the way he's playing with his cutter. And just the confidence with Mitch, man. That's the thing that, like, he got beat around and he was beaten down and he kept fighting, and he's in this thing. And now you see him out there with no sleeves, chucking heat past guys. Like, and you know what I like, Chris? This is the final point I'll make on Mitch. He's at 100, finishes the game at 107 pitches. Like, old Derek Shelton, old treatment of Pirates pitchers would have yanked them long before that, and they let him go. And I love it, man. Let the ace go. Let him do his thing. And he's living up to his end of the bargain too.
We got to get to, of course, the big name that everyone wants to talk about too. That's O'Neal Cruz. Comes out. He has what, 6 hits in 23 at bats. He's got a double. Has that home run, 3 ribbies so far. How have you seen his approach this year? How is he different from last year, at least in how he started the season?
Yeah, a lot of what we've seen from Cruz has just been an additional layer of patience. I think he came up last year and was really trying to do a lot, impress people. He's going to hit everything super hard, super far. And he's dialed it back a little bit. You see him taking more. You see him sticking to his plan, sticking to what works for him. He's been better left on left. It hasn't been perfect by any stretch. He has certainly chased pitches. I'm not presenting it as he's a finished product, but that area of his game has improved. And I think he's holding himself to a higher standard. I watched O'Neal Cruz in Boston strike out and didn't have a particularly good at bat. Shuts his bat up the third baseline. Like, I got it. He's only made 1 error, which for him through 6 games, playing a lot, cold weather, I think is pretty darn good. His defense has looked better. It really has. And I think he, at this rate, should be able to perform better defensively. So he's growing up, man. It's a mature approach. Still a real toolsy kid, super fun to watch, but we're seeing him grow up.
One thing you and I talked about before you went to Bradenton was the need for the veterans that were added to this roster, like Kutch, like Santana, to kind of help cultivate, some culture, some belief, some understanding with the younger guys in this roster. What kind of leadership roles have you seen some of those veterans take so far in the clubhouse?
Oh, buddy, it's been big, Chris. It really has. It's been really important for this team. I'm going to start with Kutch. I think the other guy, it's not to tamp down the other guys. It's just like, there is such a noticeable presence with this guy. It's awesome to watch. And he didn't come into Pirate City and act like he ran the joint. And he could. He's Andrew McCutchen. He can walk around and do whatever the heck he wants to. But he's quiet, doesn't say too much. I was asking him early on about like his approach with that stuff. He said, man, I don't know anybody here. Like, that's not my style. I'm going to get to know people. And he sort of, back channeled it a little bit. And now you're seeing it come out a little bit more. He's like just constantly sort of talking to guys and in the middle of things. He's around, he's present. There's just such a great demeanor to him. But it's not just Kutch, right? Like, Santana's been outstanding. Rich Hill has been great in his own way. Austin Hedges is one of the more like extroverted guys that you're going to like hear talking a lot. And he's like this really intense catching nerd, but you can't help but talk to him about pitching and get fired up. And so the veteran guys, Chris, I mean, they've been productive. And G-Man Choi, by the way, is a total riot. Like, he needs to play better, hit better, but he is a lot of fun and could be for this group. So I really like the veterans they brought in. I think it is not a coincidence that the vibe is better based on what these guys have done.
Man, Jason, you got me excited over here. Like, you got to understand, I grew up in the 90s. My first real playoff team that I remember ever seeing was that 2010, the mid-2010 squad that kind of made their run. And you got me over here feeling like, okay, Buccos, like there's something to be hyped about. Yep. Now, it seems like there is a lot of excitement for opening day, Friday, the day this episode's coming out. We're recording this on Thursday, of course. They're playing the White Sox at home. There's been calls for a blackout. What is your expectation of what you're going to see? Hill's going to be making the first start in this series. How do you see this team heading into their first homestand?
Chris, I'm quite confident that the atmosphere that is out. No, I was not on the beat for the 2013 wildcard game, so keep that in mind. Like, I have not seen an atmosphere like we're going to see on Friday. I don't think anybody has seen an atmosphere like we're going to see on Friday since 13, 14, 15. I really don't. And I mean, that's not saying this team's going back to the playoffs, because I don't think they are, but I think they're headed in that direction. And I think there's going to be such an outpouring for Andrew McCutchen, obviously, but for Burnett, Russell Martin, the way that goes down, the blackout is perfect. My boy, Michael McHenry, a part of that. I love seeing it. That's just, it's the vibe around this team right now, man. Like, people should start. I have a column. I don't know when it's going, but it's basically saying to, like, give this group a chance. They're fun. Like, they're not all the way there. The Pirates haven't done everything perfectly, but man, this group is fun. They're worth following. I do think they're on the right path. I do think they can do this and figure it out. And we're just starting to see those signs. And, I'm excited to see what Rich Hill does on Friday. He's looked better in spring training than he has. He had that one inning in Cincinnati, whatever, but then locked him down. I have no concerns about him, and he's going to be fine. Brian Hayes is going to be fine. This is going to be a fun team to watch, Chris. I'm convinced of it.
You're convincing me the way that you're sounding. And you said this before we even went to Bradenton. You were talking about this, and I was like sitting there like, I don't know, man. I've heard this before on the Pittsburgh Pirates. But hey, man, I'm legit excited. I liked what I've seen so far, and certainly it's going to be exciting. It's going to be a packed house Friday afternoon, 4:12 for first pitch. It's going to be really a lot of fun. Jason's going to have all the amazing coverage right there from PNC Park in the North Shore of Pittsburgh. Jason, thanks so much for joining us here in the North Shore Drive podcast. We'll have you back on soon to keep talking about these Pirates and see how they continue going into this early part of spring. I'm Chris Carter, your host of the North Shore Drive podcast. Thanks again to Ray Fittipaldo for his time talking Pittsburgh Steelers. We're back Monday. It's going to be Brian and Ray hosting the show while I'm coming back from a trip. So get ready for them. But I'll be back Wednesday for that edition of the North Shore Drive podcast. From Chris Carter, Jason Mackey, Ray Fittipaldo, thanks for checking out. Check out all of our great content at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette at post-gazette.com. See you again next week. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you're watching this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down below in the description.